Justin Fields is one of the trickiest quarterback evaluations we've had to make in the NFL in some time. Both his biggest fans and his biggest detractors are right and wrong about his attributes and his shortcomings. So let's try and make sense of what we can reasonably expect from Justin Fields in 2025 today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Friday, May 9th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GangReadNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. And today's episode is brought to you by the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Turn any TV into your Xbox. No console needed. Head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to learn more. Well, on today's show, we are going to talk about the Jets quarterback position and what we should be expecting from each of the Jets quarterbacks in 2025. We're going to talk about the number 3 quarterback job, a developmental position, which is now wide open. We'll talk about a veteran who should be a steadying presence in Tyrod Taylor. But we're going to begin by talking about the presumptive starter at quarterback, Justin Fields, who I think the more I examine him, is one of the trickiest evaluations we've had to make in quite a while at the quarterback position in the NFL. A couple things I'd like to say. First of all, sometimes, many times in life, you'll find two extremes arguing a position, and people will say, "I'm going to take the middle ground. The middle ground will make me sound smart." And they will say, "Well, it's not quite what you're saying, and it's not quite what you're saying. The truth lies somewhere in between." And that's not always true. Sometimes the truth actually does lie with like one of the extreme positions. I remember when Mike Maccagnan was the general manager of the Jets, there was a group of Jets fans who said Maccagnan was awful, one of the worst GMs in the league. I was one of them. There was another group that said, no, Maccagnan's actually a really good GM. He's going to build the Jets into a good team. And then there was a third group who kind of like took the middle ground. They said, he's not that good, but he's not as bad as you're making him out to be. And looking back, Maccagnan actually was that bad. And the people who took the middle ground were wrong. I think in the case of Justin Fields, the people taking the middle ground are right, because there are people who feel very passionately about Justin Fields, either very pro Fields, think he's got enormous potential, or anti Fields and think, he's been a big disappointment. And the reality is, I think both of them kind of have a point if you've watched him through his career and you think about what potential he has. Another point I'd like to make is you frequently hear about a quarterback. He's got a unique skill set and the team needs to know how to use him. And I would venture to say 9 times out of 10, that's complete nonsense. It's just making excuses for a quarterback who has not been able to function in his career. I think with Justin Fields, there is some truth to it, but there also is some truth to the notion that, he just has been very disappointing to date. Look, he's a quarterback entering year 5. He was drafted high in the first round. In fact, his team traded up to get him his original team traded up to get him in the first round, the Chicago Bears. Through his first 4 years, he has 2 passing games of 300 yards or more. But when he's played at a high level, he's played at a really high level. About 1 in 5 of his starts where he's thrown an appreciable number of passes have resulted in a passer rating of 100. So you can see that that's not necessarily the number you want. You'd like the big time passing games to come more frequently. But you've seen that when things go well for him, they can go really well. But as much as anything, Justin Fields does bring a unique skill set to the table. Unlike 90% of the quarterbacks you'll hear this said about, Justin Fields brings a lot of ability as a runner. And if you add that to a passing ability that's maybe not top of the league, maybe not even good as a starter, but functional, it's not that far that Justin Fields needs to go to improve to be good enough for the Jets. Now, I think this is probably not going to be a team that's looking to be super quarterback dependent in 2025. I think the Jets are a team that's going to lean on their defense, first of all, on their special teams, which they're going to hope gets back to form after a bit of a difficult 2024, and their run game. And Justin Fields is the type of quarterback who can help you a lot in the run game. I think that he's the type of guy, I've used this phrase before, and I think it's accurate. I think he's the type of guy who conceivably could unlock Breece Hall, because Fields' threats as a runner is going to make it easier to operate as a running back. Normally you have to block every defender near the line of scrimmage. So, it's really tough to run. But when you have a mobile quarterback, and not just a mobile quarterback, if you have a quarterback who has the ability to make impact plays as a rusher, you don't need to block everybody on the line. You essentially can leave one guy unblocked, and that guy becomes the person you read, because a runner like Fields can watch that guy. And if that guy looks like he's going to crash to Breece Hall, he can pull the ball back and keep it himself and break off a big run. And the threat of Fields doing that may keep that guy at home. And if you hand the ball to Breece Hall, that guy's essentially out of the play now. And you have one extra blocker, more or less, because the guy that was dedicated to blocking the read guy now can block somebody else. So this is the type of thing that's going to make the running game better. And while Fields has not been a great thrower through his career, there have been flashes there have been flashes of ability. So where's Justin Fields right now? I would say that, to date, his work with the Chicago Bears and Pittsburgh Steelers, it's not been good enough. And that's why he's entering team 3 in year 5 of his career. But there's also a reason he's found a third team willing to take a chance on him, and that there's enough ability out there to be intrigued. So, his detractors say, he hasn't been good enough. They're right. His biggest fans say, there's potential there. They're also right. I think what the Jets are looking for from Fields is, first of all, impact running. I think that the Jets will want him to be a guy who runs for around 700 yards, if not more. I think the Jets are looking to be a dominant run team. Now, when I say that does not preclude the idea the Jets need to be effective in the passing game, because the Jets need to throw the ball more effectively. And Fields needs to throw the ball more effectively than he has in his career. And there are going to be a lot of people responsible for that. Tanner Engstrand, the offensive coordinator, is going to be one of them. He's going to be responsible for teaching Fields better fundamentals than he's learned at other points in his career. He's going to be responsible for designing easy concepts to execute. The well-designed passing play that gives the quarterback an easy throw. That's the best friend of the young quarterback trying to develop. But it's not just on Engstrand. It's also on Fields himself. Fields has to get better. Through Justin Fields' career, I followed him from Chicago to Pittsburgh. When he's failed, there's been a debate about whether the coaching let him down or whether he just wasn't good enough. And I think in this case, not always, sometimes the coaching staff takes all the blame for the young quarterback and the quarterback just can't play. I think in this case, it's been a little bit of both. And it's going to have to be a partnership between Engstrand and Fields. Engstrand's going to have to figure out concepts Fields is comfortable with. Fields needs to execute them at a higher level. Fields needs to get through his reads better than he has in Chicago and Pittsburgh. Fields needs to show better pocket ability, better pocket presence than he has in Chicago and Pittsburgh. I mean, one of his worst tendencies, and this goes back to his days in Ohio State, is his tendency to hold the ball for too long and take sacks he shouldn't take. But there's also big playability in Justin Fields, the type of quarterback who can extend plays with his legs and also break off runs, both designed and on scrambles. And while, again, there's a difference between saying his throwing hasn't been good enough to date and saying he's shown no ability as a thrower. He's shown ability as a passer. It just hasn't been consistent enough. It hasn't been good enough. So what the Jets need from Justin Fields is improvement, but this is not like a huge, impossible to make improvement. With just some improvement, I think, as a passer, you can get to the point where you add that to what he can add in the run game. You may have a functional starting quarterback, and I think that's what the goal is for the New York Jets in 2025. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll look at what's behind Fields. There's a guy who's a great professional in Tyrod Taylor, but I got to be honest with you. I think that he'll add something to the locker room. I think Jets fans might be overrating a little bit what he can add on the field. I'll explain why that is as we continue here on this Friday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by the Amazon Fire Stick 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also an Xbox? Turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with Fire TV Stick 4K devices, no console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. Do you already have a console? A Fire TV Stick 4K device is more affordable and easier to travel with, allowing you to take you or your kids' games wherever you plug in. Have you ever wanted to try out Xbox games without the big upfront investment in the console? Fire TV Stick 4K can be a low-pressure way to start exploring. How do you currently stream content, and how much smoother would it be with a faster 4K-ready streaming stick? Head to Amazon.com/FireTV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K second generation, Fire TV Stick 4K Max first and second generation, and Fire TV Cube third generation. Thanks so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day. Big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Today, our focus is on the quarterback position for the New York Jets. Jets enter the season with Justin Fields as their starting quarterback. That's already been announced. The Jets announced that there will not be an open competition or any sort of competition in training camp. Fields has the starting job, and the only way that would have changed is if the Jets had drafted a quarterback in the first and maybe second round this year. But of course, the Jets did not take a quarterback in the 2025 NFL draft, and that likely means that Tyrod Taylor will be the number 2 quarterback. And I think that that's probably the right role for him if the Jets are going to continue with him. Now, I'll be honest with you. I don't want to be disingenuous here. In the early part of the offseason, I said I felt like the Jets maybe would be best served moving on from Tyrod Taylor. And the reason I said that was Tyrod Taylor was a very logical player for the Jets to have in 2024 when it was a veteran team and they were looking to do big things immediately. Like in 2024, it was all about the here and now. And we saw that through the way the Jets built their roster. We saw that through the way they managed their salary cap. We saw that through the number of older players the team brought in. The Jets were, the expression, it's almost like a cliche at this point. The Jets were all in 2024. And the Jets, for that reason, probably needed a veteran backup quarterback for Aaron Rodgers. And the reason that it had to be a veteran was the guy that went into the season with his offensive coordinator, Nathaniel Hackett. In 2023, of course, Aaron Rodgers only played 4 snaps. And a young quarterback, Zach Wilson, stepped into the starting lineup. And to put it in a way that's maybe not delicate, Hackett did not feel like it was his job to help Wilson out. I mean, the Jets pretty much kept running the Aaron Rodgers offense with Zach Wilson. I mean, that's well documented at this point. It was reported throughout the 2023 season. The Jets really were not doing much to adapt their offense to the new reality of Zach Wilson instead of Aaron Rodgers. And I don't know about you, but if I'm moving from a future Hall of Fame quarterback who knows everything at the line of scrimmage to a young guy who struggled in his career who doesn't really know how to run an offense, you might need to take on a bigger role as an offensive coordinator. But Nathaniel Hackett didn't do that. Nathaniel Hackett essentially viewed the Jets as like a way to get a salary, I guess. It didn't feel like he had. I never got the feeling Nathaniel Hackett felt like he had to work to justify his employment with the team. So if that's the case, you had to have a veteran in there. You had to have somebody, if Aaron Rodgers went down, who understood how to set up protection, how to make a pre-snap read and where the ball and get the ball where it needed to go. For a team like the 2025 Jets, I'm not sure Tyrod has the same sort of logic, but I do think he helps from the standpoint that this is a team that's very much in reset mode at the moment. So having a guy who, by all accounts, has been a really good veteran presence around every team he's been, there's a positive there. And perhaps, the veteran mentor is kind of a cliche at this point, but maybe he can offer Justin Fields some of the finer points at playing the quarterback position, because Tyrod himself was a guy who did not really step into the starting lineup until a couple of years into his career. He began his career as Joe Flacco's backup with the Baltimore Ravens, and then got a starting role with the Buffalo Bills in 2015, which he kept for 3 years. So, it took Tyrod a couple of years before he was able to lock down a starting role. And I think it's fair to say, even though he didn't get many opportunities with Baltimore before he went to the Bills and became a starter, he probably would not have been ready to start right off the bat. So he can kind of fill Fields in on some of the finer points of, what it's like to learn at the quarterback position. And I'm sure he can give Fields some pointers that will improve Fields' play. I do get the sense Jets fans are maybe expect a little bit too much out of Tyrod, though, if he has to take the field. I think this is due to 2 primary reasons. I think the first reason people may be expecting a little bit too much out of Tyrod is he played 2 drives last year and led 2 touchdown drives. Now, that doesn't really mean a whole lot. 2 drives don't mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things anyway. But in both of those situations, those were games that were well out of hand, where the Jets, it was week 1 against San Francisco and then late season in Buffalo. Jets were getting blown out. The other team kind of took their foot off the gas. They saw some prevent coverages. Veteran like Tyrod's going to be able to carve up a defense in that situation. Very much the same way like a veteran quarterback could carve up a defense in the second half of a preseason game. It was that level of intensity, that sort of situation. The second reason I think fans might be expecting a little bit too much from Tyrod is that 3-year stretch I mentioned earlier, that 2015 through 2017 stretch, where Tyrod gave the Bills solid quarterback play, if not spectacular. He was a guy who protected the football generally, got the ball where it needed to go, was able to add something with his legs. It wasn't a guy who added a whole lot that wasn't there, but generally a guy who would be able to get what the defense provided him. But of course, it's 2025 now, not 2017. It's been a long time since Tyrod Taylor's been a regular starter in this league. Tyrod Taylor was in his 20s the last time he was a regular starter. Now he's in his mid-30s, and the expectations should be adjusted accordingly. So, if what you're looking for out of a backup quarterback is somebody who understands the finer points of running an offense, again, can keep the offense on schedule, get the ball where it needs to go over the short run, maybe for a week or 2 or 3. And then, if he has to play any longer, his limitations may be exposed. That's the type of thing Tyrod Taylor might be able to do. And I think on a team like the Jets, there is a benefit to having, getting a solid locker room guy, a guy whose career path doesn't exactly overlap with Justin Fields' because Fields came in with much higher expectations. Tyrod was a day 3 draft pick, but a guy who took a couple of years to find a starting role, took a couple of years to find a situation where he could get playing time and have success, and maybe relate that to Justin Fields. Tyrod can do that. If you're looking for a guy that can compete with Justin Fields, if you're looking for a guy that can lead the Jets for 17 games, well, Tyrod hasn't really led any offense for 17 games in 8 years. That's a lot to ask. So I think as long as you keep your expectations in check for Tyrod, he's a player who could help the Jets out. I think, at the backup quarterback spot, there's very rarely a player who's, a plus player. You need to be in a situation with Green Bay where, if you go back 20 years where Aaron Rodgers was backing up Brett Favre, where you have an early first round pick backing up a living legend. That's really the only situation you'll ever find yourself in the NFL where you have a quality starting quarterback as your backup. Really, for your backup, you're looking for somebody who can manage the team for the short term, someone who'll be a good locker room guy. And I think that these are things that Tyrod Taylor is perfectly capable of being. So, he can, he'll if he has to go in there for a short run, I think he can keep the Jets afloat. But I don't see him as a guy who's a major competitor for Justin Fields. In fact, I'd even take it a step further. I'd say if Tyrod Taylor is actually really threatening Justin Fields, that probably is a warning sign about Justin Fields. And I would hope and expect that Justin Fields is going to end up playing at a much higher level. That you're on the Locked On Jets podcast. There's one quarterback spot left, and I think the Jets are probably going to keep 3. And that spot has been thrown wide open by the recent retirement of Jordan Travis. And I think it ultimately comes down to a single question. Would the Jets prefer somebody with upside who could develop into more in the future, or somebody who could run a somewhat functional offense? And that's what the decision between Brady Cook and Adrian Martinez will come down to. We'll go into that deeper as we continue here on this Friday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by LinkedIn. As a small business owner, your work does not end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner who works just as hard as you do. And that's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. I'll tell you how it works. LinkedIn's new feature, Post Your Job, can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. Add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture to double your reach to qualified candidates. No wonder 72% of small businesses say LinkedIn helps them find high-quality hires. Of course, Jets just had the NFL draft. They have a scouting department to find the best talents. You probably don't have as expansive a scouting department as the Jets do, so LinkedIn can be your scouting department. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. It's the Locked On Jets podcast. On this Friday, we're talking about expectations for the Jets quarterbacks in 2025. The last spot on the Jets roster has kind of been thrown up in the air. Most of us figured Jordan Travis would get it, but of course, Jordan Travis announced his retirement from the NFL last week because of the injury he suffered to end his college career. I think it's likely the Jets are going to keep 3 quarterbacks. In fact, I really don't understand why teams don't keep 3 quarterbacks in this day and age. A couple of years ago, the NFL changed its rules for active players on game day. And essentially, the league allowed teams to dress an emergency quarterback who does not count against the allocation of 47 to 48 active players on game day. So essentially, this guy doesn't count against your active players. You have 53 on your roster. You can activate 48 or 47, 47 or 48, depending on how many offensive linemen are up. You can also call up a couple of guys from your practice squad if you want. But bottom line is 47 to 48 players active on game day. This extra quarterback doesn't count against it, but if you're starting and backup quarterbacks get injured, he can go in the game and help you at least help you run a shell of an offense. I don't see why teams don't take advantage of it. It seems like a waste to not use a roster spot on a third quarterback, because the difference between having a third quarterback in there and having somebody like Garrett Wilson is pretty big. With a third quarterback in there, you can at least run like a fraction of your offense. With Garrett Wilson, the reason I bring up Garrett Wilson is Garrett Wilson played some quarterback at a lower level, so he had suffered a bunch of injuries at the position, had nobody else. He'd probably be the one that goes into quarterback. I mean, maybe he can throw the ball a little bit, but you're not really going to be able to run much of a passing game with Garrett playing quarterback. So who's going to get the third quarterback spot? There are two competitors at the moment. The Jets, of course, could add somebody, but one is the undrafted free agent signing Brady Cook out of Missouri, and the second is Adrian Martinez, who actually was one of those underrated, unheralded stars of Jets preseason last year. And I think the question comes down to what the Jets prioritize. Do the Jets want better production right now, or potentially more upside? So why do I frame it that way? Well, Adrian Martinez is the type of guy that you can build a specific package around him. And that's kind of like what you're looking for, because he's a mobile quarterback. You saw that a bit last year when he played during the exhibition season. He's a guy who makes plays with his legs, so you can throw in some designed runs with him. You can get the offense moving that way. Now, if you lean on that stuff too long, you're going to get exposed. But for a short stretch, when the defense isn't really sure how to defend it, defense is still getting its bearings, you may be able to move the ball effectively. And if there are no quality, we just talked in the last segment about how few quality options there are for number two quarterbacks. Well, think about what that means for number three quarterbacks. So number three quarterbacks, you're just looking for somebody who can run the offense effectively for any short period of time. And perhaps, like Adrian Martinez, if you build in a package in the run game, might be able to do that. There's also the factor, which I don't think I'm going to mention it, but I don't really buy it. But there's also the factor that, if you're going to have a mobile quarterback like Justin Fields, a guy you're going to build in a run package for, and his backup's going to be a mobile quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. Okay, you may not build as many run packages in for, because he's in his mid-30s, but a guy who can make plays with his legs. Do you want all of your quarterbacks to be the same style? I don't know that I buy that. I'll tell you why I don't buy that. I think about the Baltimore Ravens in 2018. This is one specific example, but it's like the ultimate example. That was the year they drafted Lamar Jackson, but they still had Joe Flacco at the beginning of the season. So Flacco started the year as the starting quarterback, and then they changed midway through the year, and they put Lamar in as the starter. And there could not be two quarterbacks who are more diametrically different skill set wise than Flacco or Lamar Jackson. Flacco is like the ultimate pocket passer, the ultimate immobile quarterback. And Lamar Jackson is the ultimate guy who can make plays with his legs, the ultimate quarterback you build run plays around. And the reaction among the Baltimore Ravens when Harbaugh announced he was making the change was, all right. And Baltimore's offense succeeded. Baltimore essentially changes its offensive style halfway through the season. Went from a pure pocket drop back passing game to Lamar Jackson. And they were able to do it. So it tells me the argument you need your backups to have the same style as your starters is a bit overrated. Because at the end of the day, your game plan changes from week to week. The NFL decades ago, the NFL 40 years ago, maybe changing your offense on the fly would have been difficult when the offenses were much more limited in the plays that they had. But in today's NFL, playbooks have hundreds, if not thousands of plays, and you're only picking a handful each week. You're essentially changing your playbook every week. I don't think it's that big of a factor. The question is, do you prefer a guy who can run a shell of an offense or a guy with maybe a little bit more upside in Brady Cook? And I don't want to overstate Brady Cook's upside. He's an undrafted free agent. Very, very few undrafted free agent quarterbacks work out in the NFL. In fact, for all the grief NFL teams get for their handling of the quarterback position, one thing I will say is once you get past the first round, and especially once you get past day 2 of the draft, there aren't many quarterbacks who stick. The NFL is pretty good at weeding out the guys who have very low odds of success. And I think it's fair to say Brady Cook's one of them. But guy was a multi-year starter in the SEC, guy who's at least shown some command of passing concepts. I don't think Adrian Martinez is ever going to do that. So, Brady Cook conceivably could develop into a decent backup down the line. I mean, the odds are against him, but it's there's at least there's at least a legitimate possibility of that. In a way, I don't think there is with Adrian Martinez. Adrian Martinez, a couple of years into his career, really never developed as a passer. Ran the ball a lot in college at Nebraska. So yeah, I don't think that there's much of a chance that he's going to get much better than he is today. What he is today is a guy who might be a functional number 3 quarterback, a guy you can build your run game around. Now, where would I fall on this debate? I don't want to end the show without giving you my thoughts on it. I think for where the Jets are right now as a team, this goes back to, 2024 all in. 2024 is all about the here and now. We don't care about tomorrow. 2025 is different. 2025, you have a first-year head coach, you have a first-year GM. It's more about the future than it is the present. The Jets are still going to try and win games. Don't get me wrong. The Jets aren't going out there trying to win 3 games this year. Jets aren't trying to land the number 1 pick in the draft. But when we're talking about the balance between the now and the future, I think it leans more towards the future. So I'd be less interested in the guy who maybe gives you a little bit more now in Martinez, and more interested in the guy who maybe could be a better player down the line in Cook. That's where I fall on this. But look, I don't feel that passionately. I don't know that either of these guys is very likely to produce much for the Jets this season or in the future. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll be back on Monday to talk more Jets.